All right, let's dive into something pretty eerie today, a real head scratcher. We're heading up to Arthur's Seat,
Oh, yeah.
that volcanic crag overlooking Edinburgh,
Huh.
place steeped in folklore and legends.
Right.
But under its slopes, tucked away, there's a secret, kind of a macabre one, a mystery,
It is.
and it's puzzled people for centuries.
It has.
Really has.
Yeah.
So
It all.
so how did this all begin?
Well, it starts way back in 1836
Why?
with a group of boys out rabbit hunting.
Okay.
Just lads being lads,
Yeah.
out for a day of fun. And imagine their surprise when they stumble across this hidden opening,
Uh-huh.
sealed up with slate, and inside,
Yeah.
17 miniature coffins.
Wow. Oh,
Each one meticulously crafted, each one with a tiny
Guys.
hand-carved figure inside.
17 tiny coffins.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Oh.
That's enough to send chills down anyone's spine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like something straight out of like a
Right.
gothic novel or something like that. So what were these coffins like? I mean, what did they actually...
I mean, they were remarkably detailed.
Yeah.
Each one was hand-carved from a single piece of pine,
Mhm.
some even decorated with tin.
Yeah.
Really astonishing level of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And then inside,
Yeah.
these little tiny figures dressed in custom-made clothing,
Wow.
painstakingly stitched and glued, almost unsettling
Yeah.
precision. Like somebody poured their heart and soul into
They created these miniature
Yeah.
worlds of mourning.
little worlds. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. Just the level of detail, the
Mm.
care that must have gone into creating those figures. It points to something more than just a prank
Right.
or just mischief.
Right.
Like kids wouldn't do that.
No.
Wouldn't go to that effort, I don't think.
Yeah. And the location
Yeah,
itself adds to the mystery.
Yeah. And the location.
Arthur's Seat, named after the legendary King Arthur, has always held a special place in
Yeah.
Scottish folklore.
Yeah.
For centuries, people believed that the dew
Mhm.
collected on its slopes had magical properties.
Oh, wow.
Young women would even climb the hill on May Day, hoping to wash their faces in the dew, believing it would preserve their youth and beauty.
So you've got this already mysterious location, steeped in folklore, ancient beliefs, and then you find these meticulously crafted miniature coffins.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what people were thinking back in 1836. What were some of the theories going around?
I mean, it sent shockwaves through the city.
Yeah.
The newspapers, they had a field day.
Yeah.
Printing these sensationalized accounts and just fueling all sorts of speculation.
Right.
You had theories about witchcraft, ancient Saxon burial customs, seafaring superstitions.
Okay.
Some even drew a connection to a local murder site
Oh, wow.
known as Mushat's Cairn.
Muschette's Cairn. Okay. We are going into dark territory here.
We are.
What's the story behind this Muschette's Cairn?
It's a pretty grim tale.
Yeah.
Back in 1720, Nicole Muschette, a respected surgeon, was accused of murdering his wife,
Oh.
Margaret, bludgeoning her to death, actually, with a pair of riding boots.
Oh, my gosh.
He was convicted and hanged. His body was left to rot on a gibbet near the
Wow.
site of the murder, and the spot became known as Mushat's Cairn, a grim reminder of his crime, and a source for local ghost stories.
Okay. So that is a chilling tale.
Yes.
And it's easy to see how people would connect it to those coffins. I mean, they both have this macabre element,
Yeah.
this sense of darkness, violence, that would have resonated with the, fears and superstitions of the time.
Precisely. People look for patterns,
Yeah.
connections, especially when they're faced with something unsettling, unexplained. But as intriguing as those early theories were, the true nature of these Arthur's Seat coffins, it remained a mystery. The coffins themselves vanished shortly after they were found, disappearing into a private collection for nearly 70 years.
So these miniature coffins, these tiny figures, just
Yeah.
hidden away from the world, their secrets locked away
Yeah.
in some collector's cabinet. Did they ever resurface?
They did. In 1901, they reappeared. They were donated to the National Museum of Scotland.
Okay.
And their reemergence just reignited public fascination and, prompted a whole new wave of theories. But one connection stands out as particularly chilling,
Yeah.
a potential link to the infamous Burke and Hare murders.
Burke and Hare. The body snatchers,
Exactly.
who were supplying corpses to Dr. Robert Knox.
The very same.
Wow.
Their crimes shocked Edinburgh in the 1820s, exposed a gruesome underworld, where poverty and desperation could push people to do unimaginable things.
Right.
And the parallels between their case and the Arthur Seat coffins, well, they're quite striking.
Okay, I am intrigued. What are these parallels?
Well, let's start with the number of coffins. 17,
Right.
found on Arthur's Seat. Same number as the number of bodies that Burke and Hare are known to have sold.
17.
17. including a lodger who died naturally,
Right.
not by their hand.
So we had this numerical coincidence.
Yes.
This connection.
Raises questions.
Yeah.
A possible link.
Right. So is the theory then that someone connected to these Burke and Hare murders maybe created these coffins as some sort of, I don't know, tribute or even a twisted form of atonement?
That's exactly what many researchers and historians believe. It's a chilling possibility, but one that supported by a number of very compelling details hidden within the construction of the coffins themselves.
Yeah.
And those are the details, those subtle clues that we'll be exploring next.
So we've got that eerie numerical connection, 17 coffins, 17 bodies. But you mentioned there are other details, clues hidden within the coffins themselves that might link them to Burke and Hare. So what did researchers find when they really started examining those miniature coffins up close?
Well, in the 1990s, two researchers, Alan Simpson and Samuel Meny, they conducted a pretty detailed analysis, and their findings were quite revealing. One of the first things they noticed were variations in the construction. Some coffins, they had rounded corners, others had square corners, some were lined with cloth, while one was lined with paper.
Interesting. What could those variations tell us? I mean, does it suggest multiple creators or maybe just one person working over a long period and just kind of refining their technique as they went?
That's a very good observation, yeah. The inconsistencies definitely point to the possibility of multiple creators or maybe a single creator, experimenting over time.
Right.
And then there's another detail, one that's particularly intriguing because it ties directly to William Burke's profession.
Okay, I'm all ears. What is it?
The type of tin used to decorate some of the coffins. It was very similar to the tin used in shoe buckles back then.
Okay.
And as you may recall, William Burke was a cobbler.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is significant. It's not just a random material.
Right.
It's something directly connected to his everyday life.
Exactly.
Almost like he was using materials that were readily available. Scraps from his work, even.
It's a detail that, adds a layer of chilling plausibility to that Burke and Hare connection.
Yeah.
It's not just a numerical coincidence anymore. It's like now we have a tangible link between the coffins and one of the murderers.
It's like a breadcrumb trail leading us back to Burke.
Yeah.
But did they find anything else that might connect the coffins to the victims themselves? Like any personal items? Or anything that could help identify who they were?
Well, the figures, they weren't dressed in what you'd typically associate with funeral attire. More everyday garments. And their eyes were open, which some researchers think means that, they weren't meant to represent actual corpses.
But couldn't that also be interpreted as representing the victim's state at the time of their murders? I mean, Burke and Hare suffocated their victims, often in their lodgings. Wouldn't it make sense for the figures to be dressed in everyday clothes with their eyes open?
That's a good point. Yeah. The lack of traditional funeral attire, the open eyes, it could definitely reflect, how the victims died.
Right.
It's one of those details that's open to interpretation, and it just adds to the mystery.
So even the details that seem to point to the victims can be read in different ways. It's like this puzzle keeps shifting as we try to put it together.
Yeah.
So given the advancements in forensic science, has anyone tried to analyze the coffins using modern techniques, like DNA testing, for example?
Yeah, there was a team from National Geographic back in 2005. They attempted to extract DNA from the coffins, hoping to match it to William Burke.
Right.
But the tests were inconclusive.
Right.
The museum, understandably wouldn't allow them to take, the kinds of samples they needed for a more definitive analysis.
That's a shame. It would have been incredible if they could have extracted viable DNA and potentially solved this whole thing.
It would have been.
But even without that concrete proof, the Burke and Hare theory seems like the most compelling, wouldn't you say?
It certainly is, yeah. But the question of who created the coffins, that remains.
Yeah.
Was it Burke himself trying to find some sort of macabre redemption?
Right.
Or was it somebody else, connected to the crimes, burdened by guilt, trying to make amends in their own way?
Let's delve into those possibilities. If we assume there's a connection to the murders, who are our main suspects,
Yeah.
and what might have motivated them to create these tiny, haunting tributes. So we're left with this big question mark hanging over the Arthur's Seat coffins. If we assume a connection to the Burke and Hare murders,
Yeah.
who created them and why? It seems like we've got a few suspects to consider.
We do.
Let's start with the most obvious one. William Burke himself.
Yeah.
He was hanged for his crimes, obviously, but could he have made the coffins before his arrest, maybe seeking some form of, I don't know, twisted atonement?
It's a chilling thought,
Yeah.
but it makes a strange kind of sense.
Right.
Meticulous detail of the coffins,
Oh.
the care taken in creating them, it could be seen as an attempt to give his victims the, proper burials that they were denied in real life.
It's like a way of acknowledging the humanity of his victims,
Yeah.
which seems at odds with the brutality of his crimes.
Right. But the human psyche, it's a complex thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Capable of holding, conflicting emotions and motivations.
True. But wouldn't Burke have been a little preoccupied, with avoiding arrest and continuing his gruesome business? Would he really have had the time or the mental space for such a painstaking project?
That's a valid point. And as we know, Burke was caught and he was executed. So if he was the creator, he certainly didn't find much peace in his efforts.
Okay, so maybe Burke isn't our guy. Who else could it be?
Well, there's his accomplice, William Hare. But Hare, along with their wives, was driven out of Edinburgh. Angry mob,
Right.
after being released from custody. Doesn't seem likely that he would have had the opportunity to create and deposit the coffins
Yeah.
without being caught.
Yeah, and Hare was known to be particularly ruthless, so the idea of him seeking atonement seems a little less likely. What about someone who is indirectly involved? Maybe someone who witnessed the horrors, but wasn't directly responsible for them.
Okay.
Like a close associate, maybe
Yeah.
another shoemaker who knew Burke and was, horrified by his actions.
You're thinking someone who felt complicit,
Yeah, exactly.
burdened by guilt for not speaking out maybe, or intervening.
Yeah. They might have felt responsible in some way, even though they didn't actually participate in the murders. Creating those coffins could have been their way of trying to make amends, of trying to right a wrong that they felt powerless to stop.
That's a compelling theory, aligns with that idea of atonement, and it wouldn't require the creator to have been directly involved in the murders.
Right.
It also explains why the coffins were deposited gradually over time, maybe reflecting an ongoing struggle with guilt,
Yeah.
or a desire to honor each victim, individually.
I like that. It adds a layer of human complexity to this whole thing. But we can't forget about one more potential suspect, a big one, Dr. Robert Knox.
Ah, yes. The man who benefited the most from Burke and Hare's crimes, Dr. Knox, renowned surgeon, anatomy instructor at the Edinburgh Medical College.
Right. And while he wasn't directly involved in the murders,
Right.
his demand for cadavers basically fueled the entire operation. He faced intense public scrutiny
Yeah.
and was never really able to escape the shadow of Burke and Hare.
He wasn't.
Could the coffins have been his way of grappling with his own guilt, with the consequences of his ambition?
It's certainly possible. Imagine Dr. Knox haunted by, the faces of those victims, realizing the true cost of his pursuit of knowledge. Maybe creating the coffins was his way of acknowledging their humanity, of trying to atone for the role he played in their tragic fates.
It's a chilling thought, but it adds another dimension to Knox's character. He's often portrayed as this cold, ambitious figure, but maybe there was some flicker of conscience in there
Or so.
underneath that professional facade.
And remember, Dr. Knox, he remained in Edinburgh for many years after the scandal, so he would have had the time and the resources to create the coffins and deposit them on Arthur's Seat.
Okay, so we've got three compelling suspects, each with their own possible motives. Burke seeking this twisted form of redemption, a guilt-ridden associate, trying to make amends for their perceived complicity. And Knox wrestling with the consequences of his ambition. But what if we're looking at this the wrong way? What if the focus on individual guilt is too narrow?
You're suggesting we broaden our perspective, look beyond the specific individual.
Yeah, exactly. Think about Edinburgh in the early 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
It was a city undergoing massive social and economic change. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, leading to widespread poverty,
Right.
social unrest. The Burke and Hare murders exposed this dark underbelly of the city,
Yeah.
this place where desperation could drive people to do unimaginable things. Could the coffins be a reflection of these larger social anxieties? A symbol of something more than just individual guilt?
That's a powerful idea. What if the coffins weren't created as a specific memorial to Burke and Hare's victims, but as a representation of all those who were marginalized and forgotten in this rapidly changing world?
Yeah. Those 17 figures, they could represent the countless individuals lost to poverty, disease, exploitation during this turbulent period.
Yeah.
A hidden memorial,
Yeah.
tucked away on a hillside,
Right.
steeped in folklore and mystery.
A way of giving voice to those who were silenced, of making sure their stories weren't completely erased from history.
It's a haunting and profound interpretation. It takes those coffins from a simple act of atonement and turns them into this broader statement about social injustice, about the hidden costs of progress,
Yeah.
something that still resonates with us today as we grapple with issues of inequality and the marginalization of certain groups.
It does. And then there's another theory, one that connects the coffins to a very specific historical event, the Radical War of 1820.
The Radical War, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with that one.
It wasn't a full-blown war in the traditional sense, but rather an uprising
Okay.
of workers in Scotland
Uh-huh.
demanding better working conditions and more rights.
So kind of like the labor movements we've seen throughout history, fighting for fair treatment, basic human dignity.
The very same.
Yeah.
Sadly, this particular uprising, it was quickly put down. Several of the leaders were executed, and many others were transported to Australia as punishment.
Wow. A very harsh response. But how does this connect to the Arthur Seat coffins?
Well, the following year, a group of unemployed weavers, they were tasked with building a path around Arthur's Seat. And this path became known as Radical Road.
Okay.
And a Scottish-American historian, Jeff Nisbet, he believes that the coffins, they were placed in the hillside by these weavers as a tribute to their fallen comrades.
A hidden memorial to those who fought for a better future. That's actually quite moving.
It is. Nisbet points to specific details that support his theory. The
Right.
clothing on the figures, it's made from a type of cloth that was commonly used by weavers at the time.
Right.
And the fact that most of the figures appear to be male
Yeah.
aligns with, the demographics of those who were involved in the uprising.
It's a strong argument. But if that theory is correct, why 17 coffins? Were there 17 key figures in the Radical War?
That's the one element that doesn't quite fit. While Nisbet's theory is powerful on a symbolic level, that number, it just doesn't seem to line up with the documented casualties.
So we're back to square one, it seems. Even with all of these theories, the mystery of the Arthur Seat coffins remains unsolved.
It does, and that's part of what makes them so fascinating. They challenge us, to think critically, to consider different perspectives, and to appreciate that enduring power of unanswered questions.
Right. They're a tangible link to this shadowy past, a reminder that history is often filled with secrets just waiting to be uncovered.
Waiting to be uncovered, yeah.
It's amazing that these little coffins have held our attention for almost 2 centuries.
It is.
They've sparked countless theories, inspired, writers and artists, and they continue to fascinate anyone who encounters them.
It speaks to our innate curiosity, our desire to understand the motivations behind human behavior, especially when it comes to acts that are both, macabre and strangely beautiful.
You hit the nail on the head there, macabre, and strangely beautiful. That really captures it.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Right.
We've explored several theories. Each one offers a different lens through which to view these Arthur Seat coffins. But ultimately, it's up to you to decide which interpretation resonates most strongly.
Do you believe that they represent a form of atonement for a horrific crime?
Sure.
Or are they a poignant tribute to those lost and forgotten amidst social upheaval? Or could they be something else entirely, a mystery that we may never fully unravel?
We encourage you to seek out images of these coffins
Yes.
and figures online. They are truly haunting to behold. And as you examine them, consider this. What does the act of creating and hiding these miniature coffins tell us about the human condition? What does it reveal about our need to make sense of tragedy, to find meaning in loss, and to grapple with the complexities of guilt, remorse, and the desire for redemption?
These questions, they may never have definitive answers,
Right?
but that's part of what makes the Arthur Seat Coffins such a powerful and enduring mystery.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those tiny coffins in mind.